Tonight, we're stepping away from the noise of the world and into something softer, something warmer, a story where love doesn't need to shout to be heard, where strength comes not from fists, but from the quiet moments between heartbeats. This isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. This is about finding home in another person's eyes, about the kind of love that builds slowly, like morning light creeping across a windowsill. So before you settle in, take a moment to let your shoulders drop, to release whatever weight you've been carrying from the day. Let your breathing slow and allow yourself to sink deeper into comfort. Tonight's story belongs to Jessica and Luke, two souls who found each other in a city that rarely sleeps, in a world that often forgets the power of gentleness. In the heart of Harlem, where jazz still whispers from doorways and the scent of coffee mingles with morning rain, there lived a man whose presence could calm storms. Luke Cage moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that true strength wasn't about how much you could break, but how much you could protect. His coffee shop, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop on a tree-lined street, had become a sanctuary for those seeking more than just caffeine. The morning sun filtered through large windows, casting golden rectangles across worn wooden floors. Steam rose from behind the espresso machine like incense, and the gentle hum of conversation mixed with the soft jazz playing from vintage speakers. Luke had built this place with his own hands, every beam and board chosen with care, every corner designed to welcome weary souls. He stood behind the counter, his movements deliberate and graceful as he prepared drinks for the steady stream of regulars who had come to depend on both his coffee and his steady presence. Mrs. Chen, who came in every Tuesday for her vanilla latte, always lingered to share stories about her grandchildren. Marcus, the college student who studied in the corner booth, found in Luke's shop the quiet focus he couldn't find in his cramped dorm room. But on this particular morning, as autumn painted the world in shades of amber and rust, someone new pushed through the heavy glass door. Jessica Jones stepped inside like she was testing the air for danger, her dark hair catching the light, her green eyes scanning the room with the wariness of someone who had learned that safe places were rare and precious things. She wore a leather jacket over a simple sweater, jeans that had seen better days, and boots that suggested she was always ready to walk away. There was something about her that made Luke pause in his work, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she carried herself like someone fighting an invisible war. Jessica approached the counter with measured steps, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets. The morning rush had died down, leaving only the gentle murmur of a few lingering customers and the soft patter of rain beginning against the windows. "What can I get you?" Luke asked, his voice carrying the warmth of someone genuinely interested in the answer. She studied the menu board for a moment, though Luke suspected she wasn't really reading it. "Coffee," she said finally. "Black, large." "Just coffee?" He smiled, not the practiced smile of customer service, but something genuine. "We've got some fresh pastries too, apple cinnamon scones that are still warm." Jessica shook her head, then caught herself and offered a small smile in return. "Just coffee. Thanks." As Luke prepared her order, he found himself stealing glances at this woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world in her careful posture. She stood slightly apart from everything, like she was used to being on the outside, looking in. When he handed her the steaming cup, their fingers brushed for just a moment, and he noticed how she pulled back as if touch itself might burn. "First time here?" he asked. Though he already knew the answer, he remembered every face that walked through his door. "Yeah." Jessica took a sip of her coffee, and her expression softened slightly. "Good coffee." "Thanks. I'm Luke, by the way." "Luke Cage." She hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether names were safe to share. "Jessica." "Well, Jessica, you're welcome here anytime. This place has a way of growing on people." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully, as if trying to determine whether his kindness was real or performance. What she saw in his steady gaze seemed to surprise her. Luke had the kind of eyes that had seen pain but hadn't let it harden him, that had known loss but still chose to believe in goodness. "I should go," Jessica said, though she made no immediate move toward the door. "You don't have to," Luke replied, quietly. "But if you want to stay, there's a table by the window that gets the best light this time of morning." For a moment, Jessica stood frozen between leaving and staying, between the safety of isolation and the terrifying possibility of connection. The rain outside had grown heavier, drumming against the glass like nature's own lullaby. Finally, she nodded toward the window table. Maybe for a few minutes, Luke watched her settle into the worn leather chair, her coffee cupped between her hands, like she was drawing warmth from more than just the drink. She stared out at the rain-soaked street, at people hurrying past with umbrellas and newspapers held over their heads, at the world continuing its relentless motion, while she sat perfectly still. The coffee shop around them hummed with quiet life. The espresso machine hissed softly. Pages turned in distant corners. Conversations flowed in gentle murmurs. It was the kind of place where time moved differently, where the outside world's urgency couldn't quite penetrate the warm atmosphere Luke had so carefully cultivated. As the morning stretched on, Luke found himself glancing toward Jessica's table more often than he probably should have. She hadn't moved much, just sat watching the world through rain-streaked glass, occasionally lifting her cup to her lips. There was something about her stillness that spoke of someone who had forgotten how to rest, who was learning again what it meant to simply exist without purpose or agenda. When Mrs. Chen came in for her usual Tuesday latte, she followed Luke's gaze to the window table and smiled knowingly. "Pretty girl," she said in her accented English. "Looks like she needs a friend." Luke prepared Mrs. Chen's drink with his usual care, but his mind was on the woman by the window. "Maybe," he said quietly, "or maybe she just needs a place to sit." "Sometimes," Mrs. Chen said, accepting her latte with a warm smile. "Those are the same thing." After Mrs. Chen left, Luke found himself cleaning the same spot on the counter over and over, working up the courage to do something he rarely did. He poured a fresh cup of coffee, selected one of the apple cinnamon scones he'd mentioned earlier, and approached Jessica's table. "Thought you might like a refill," he said, setting the cup down beside her nearly empty one. Jessica looked up, startled from whatever thoughts had been holding her captive. "I didn't order another one." "On the house," Luke said, then gestured to the scone. "And I know you said you didn't want anything to eat, but I've got a theory that good food can make even the worst days a little better." She stared at the scone as if it might contain hidden dangers. "I'm not really hungry." "That's okay. It'll keep." Luke pulled out the chair across from her. "Mind if I sit? It's been a long morning, and I could use a break." Jessica's first instinct was clearly to say yes. She did mind, to maintain the careful distance she'd built around herself. But something in Luke's respectful manner, in the way he waited for permission, rather than assuming it was granted, made her nod instead. Luke settled into the chair with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. He didn't immediately try to fill the silence with conversation, didn't pepper her with questions, or attempt to solve whatever troubles he could see lurking behind her eyes. Instead, he simply sat, present and patient, like he had all the time in the world. "You don't have to entertain me," Jessica said finally, her voice carrying a hint of the walls she'd spent years building. "I'm not entertaining you," Luke replied, with a gentle smile. "I'm taking a break. There's a difference. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, and the coffee shop settled into the kind of peaceful quiet that only comes when the morning rush has passed and the afternoon hasn't yet begun. Jessica found herself relaxing despite her better judgment, her shoulders dropping slightly as she absorbed the warmth and safety of this unexpected sanctuary. The scone sat untouched between them, but Jessica had broken off a small piece without really thinking about it. The taste was warm and sweet, cinnamon mingling with butter and apple, and she found herself taking another bite before she could stop herself. "My grandmother used to make scones," she said quietly, surprising herself with the admission. "Not as good as these, but she tried." Luke nodded, understanding that some stories came in fragments, offered tentatively like gifts that might be refused. "Sounds like she was the kind of person who showed love through food." "Yeah." Jessica's voice grew softer. She was the kind of person who believed a warm kitchen could fix most things. "Smart woman." Luke leaned back in his chair, his presence steady and undemanding. "Some of my best memories are of my father teaching me to cook," said a man who couldn't feed people properly, wasn't much of a man at all. Jessica looked at him more closely, taking in the way his hands rested calmly on the table. "Scarred, but gentle. Is that why you opened this place?" "Partly." Luke glanced around his coffee shop, at the carefully chosen artwork on the walls, at the plants that thrived in the window light, at the books left behind by customers that had somehow become a lending library. "I wanted to create something that mattered, something that made people feel less alone." The honesty in his words caught Jessica off guard. In her experience, people rarely said what they actually meant, especially to strangers. But Luke spoke like someone who had learned that truth was easier than pretense, that authenticity required less energy than performance. "That's a nice idea," she said, and meant it. "What about you?" Luke asked. "What brings you to this part of town?" Jessica tensed slightly, the question touching on territories she wasn't ready to explore. "I was just walking." Luke noticed the shift in her posture, the way her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Sometimes walking is the only thing that helps," he said, simply. No judgment here. The rain outside had gentled to a soft patter, and the afternoon light filtering through the windows had taken on that golden quality that made everything look like a painting. A few more customers had trickled in, but the coffee shop maintained its peaceful atmosphere. Conversations flowing in low murmurs that felt more like music than noise. Jessica found herself studying Luke's face, noting the laugh lines around his eyes, the way he really listened when people spoke to him, the absence of that restless energy that seemed to drive most people in the city. There was something about him that felt solid, like bedrock beneath shifting sand. "Can I ask you something?" she said, then continued before he could answer. "Why are you being nice to me? You don't know anything about me." Luke considered the question seriously, as if it deserved more than a quick answer. "I guess because everyone deserves kindness, and because you look like someone who hasn't had enough of it lately." Jessica felt something crack open inside her chest, some small defended space that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. You might be wrong about that. Maybe, Luke agreed, but I don't think so. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world outside continue its relentless motion while they remained still in their small bubble of warmth and safety. Jessica finished the scone without realizing it, and when Luke noticed the empty plate, he smiled but didn't comment. "I should probably get going," Jessica said eventually, though the words felt heavy with reluctance. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like," Luke replied, "but if you need to go, I understand." Jessica stood, gathering her jacket and fishing in her pocket for money. Luke waved away her attempt to pay, which only made her more determined to leave something. She pulled out a $5 bill and placed it firmly on the table. "For the scone," she said, "and the refill." "Jessica." Luke stood as well, his movements unhurried. "This place is here every day. Same time, same coffee, same terrible jokes from the regular customers. If you ever need somewhere to sit, somewhere to think, you're always welcome." She paused at his words, at the genuine offer of sanctuary they represented. "Why?" "Because everyone needs a place where they can just be themselves," Luke said, without explanation, without performance. "Sometimes the world gets too heavy, and we all need somewhere to set it down for a while." Jessica looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, the kindness in his eyes, the way he stood like someone who had never learned to be anything but honest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting me share your table," Luke replied. "It made my day better." As Jessica walked toward the door, she felt Luke's eyes following her, not possessive or demanding, but gentle and concerned, like someone watching a friend walk home in the dark. When she reached the door, she turned back one more time. "The coffee really was good," she said. Luke's smile lit up his entire face. "I'm glad you liked it." The bell above the door chimed softly as Jessica stepped back into the world. But something had shifted in the brief time she'd spent in Luke's coffee shop. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and gleaming in the afternoon light. People moved past her with their usual urban urgency, but she found herself walking slower, her steps more measured. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Jessica didn't feel like she was running from something. She felt like she might, possibly, be walking toward something instead. The thought was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. Behind her, through the rain-streaked windows of the coffee shop, Luke watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then, he began clearing her table, noting the way she'd folded her napkin precisely, the small smile that had crossed her face when she'd tasted the scone. He found himself hoping she'd come back, not just for the business, but because there had been something in her careful posture that spoke to him of someone learning to trust again. As the afternoon wore on, Luke served his usual customers with his customary warmth, but part of his mind remained with the woman who had sat by his window, drinking black coffee and watching the rain. There had been something about Jessica that felt familiar, though he was certain they'd never met before. Perhaps it was simply the recognition of one guarded soul meeting another, the way survivors could spot each other across crowded rooms. The next morning arrived wrapped in crisp autumn air and the kind of brilliant blue sky that made the city look newly minted. Luke opened his shop at the usual time, following his established routine of grinding beans, arranging pastries, and setting up the jazz playlist that had become his signature. But today, he found himself glancing toward the door more often than usual, wondering if a particular customer might return. The morning rush came and went with its familiar faces and comfortable rhythms. Mrs. Chen arrived for her Tuesday latte, sharing photos of her grandson's soccer game. Marcus claimed his corner booth, spreading textbooks across the worn wood surface. The regulars who knew each other by coffee order, if not by name, exchanged pleasantries about the weather, the news, the small dramas of neighborhood life. But Luke's attention kept drifting to the window table where Jessica had sat the day before, to the chair that had somehow become associated in his mind with quiet strength and carefully guarded vulnerability. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that one conversation with a stranger didn't constitute the beginning of anything meaningful. Yet something about yesterday had felt different, charged with possibility in a way that made the ordinary world seem suddenly full of potential. When the bell above the door chimed just before noon, Luke looked up from the espresso machine to see Jessica hesitating in the doorway, as if she was still deciding whether entering was a good idea. Today, she wore the same leather jacket, but her hair was different, softer somehow, and there was less wariness in her posture. "Black coffee?" Luke asked with a smile, already reaching for a cup. "Actually," Jessica said, stepping closer to the counter, "maybe I could try something different today." Luke felt his smile widen. "What did you have in mind?" Jessica studied the menu board with more attention than she'd given it the day before. "What would you recommend?" "Depends," Luke said, enjoying the chance to really talk to her about coffee instead of just serving it. "Do you like sweet things, rich things, something to wake you up, or something to slow you down?" Jessica considered the question seriously, as if it might reveal something important about her character. Something in between. Not too sweet, but not bitter either. Something that tastes like comfort. Luke nodded thoughtfully, then began preparing what he privately called his specialty drink. Though it wasn't on any menu, he started with a base of rich espresso, added steamed milk with just a touch of foam, a hint of vanilla, and a whisper of cinnamon. The result was something that tasted like warmth itself, like the coffee equivalent of a gentle hug. "One comfort special," he said, sliding the cup across the counter. "And before you ask, yes, I just made that name up." Jessica lifted the cup to her lips and took a careful sip. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since Luke had met her, she looked genuinely surprised. "This is perfect," she said. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess," Luke replied, though the truth was more complicated. Something about Jessica had made him want to create something just for her, something that matched the careful balance he sensed in her personality. "Want to try that table by the window again?" This time, Jessica nodded without hesitation. They settled into the same chairs as the day before. But today, the dynamic felt different. The hesitancy that had marked their first encounter had softened into something more natural. Like two people who had discovered they spoke the same quiet language. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting everything in warm amber light that made the coffee shop feel suspended outside of time. "So," Luke said, settling back in his chair with his own cup of coffee, "what's the verdict on walking? Did it help?" Jessica wrapped her hands around her mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "More than I expected," she admitted. "I don't usually stop places. Keep moving, you know. But yesterday felt different." Luke nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes we need permission to stop. Sometimes we need someone else to tell us it's okay to rest. "Is that what you do here? Give people permission?" "I try to give people space," Luke said thoughtfully. "Space to think, space to breathe, space to be whoever they are without having to explain it. The coffee's just an excuse." Jessica studied his face, noting the way he spoke about his work, like it was a calling rather than just a business. That's not how most people see customer service. Most people haven't learned that everybody's fighting something, Luke replied. Everybody who walks through that door is carrying something heavy. Maybe it's just the stress of a bad morning. Maybe it's something bigger. Either way, they deserve a place where that weight feels a little lighter. The sincerity in his words caught Jessica off guard again. She'd spent so many years around people who said one thing and meant another, who performed kindness for their own benefit, that Luke's genuine concern felt almost foreign. Yet here he was, talking about strangers like they mattered, like their pain was worth acknowledging. "You really believe that," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I have to," Luke said simply. "The alternative is too lonely." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world outside the windows. A mother pushed a stroller past, pausing to point out a particularly bright cluster of autumn leaves to her toddler. An elderly man fed pigeons from a bench across the street, his movements patient and ritualistic. The city moved around them with its usual energy, but from inside the coffee shop, it all felt distant and manageable. "Can I ask you something?" Jessica said eventually. "Sure. Yesterday, when I was sitting here, you didn't try to fix anything. You didn't ask what was wrong, or offer advice, or tell me things would get better. Why?" Luke considered her question carefully. "Because sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for someone is just witness them. Let them exist in their feelings without trying to change them or make them go away. Pain isn't always something to be solved. Sometimes it's just something to be acknowledged." Jessica felt that crack in her chest widen a little more, letting in light she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Most people want to fix things. Most people are uncomfortable with other people's pain because it reminds them of their own, Luke said. But pain isn't the enemy. Isolation is. The afternoon stretched on around them, marked by the gentle rhythm of the coffee shop's life. Customers came and went, each interaction brief and warm. Luke greeted everyone by name, remembered their usual orders, asked about their families and jobs and small daily struggles. Jessica watched him work from their table, noting how he made each person feel seen and valued, how he created tiny moments of connection in a city that often felt designed to keep people apart. "You're good at this," she observed when he returned to their table after helping a teenage girl struggling with her laptop. "Practice," Luke said, with a modest shrug. "And maybe stubbornness. I refuse to believe that people don't want to connect with each other. We just need safe ways to do it." "Safe ways," Jessica repeated thoughtfully. "That's harder than it sounds. Everything worthwhile is harder than it sounds," Luke replied. "Doesn't mean it's not worth doing." As the afternoon light began to fade, casting longer shadows across the coffee shop floor, Jessica found herself reluctant to leave again. There was something about this place, about Luke's steady presence, that made her feel more like herself than she had in months. Not the guarded, careful version of herself she presented to the world, but someone softer and more honest underneath. "I should probably head out," she said, though she made no move to gather her things. "Should probably and want to are different things," Luke observed gently. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." Jessica looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes, at the way he offered safety without asking for anything in return. "What if I want to, but think I shouldn't? Then maybe we need to examine who made those rules," Luke said, "and whether they still serve you." The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to explore fully. Jessica had lived by rules designed to protect her, walls built to keep danger out. But sitting here in the warm light of Luke's coffee shop, those walls felt less like protection and more like prison bars. "I don't usually do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Sit somewhere. Talk to people. Let my guard down." Luke nodded, understanding the weight of what she was telling him. What changed? Jessica considered the question, looking around the coffee shop that had somehow become a sanctuary in the space of 2 days. "I think I got tired," she said finally. "Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of pretending that isolation was strength. It takes more strength to trust than to stay closed off," Luke said softly. "Anyone can build walls. It takes courage to build bridges." Outside, the streetlights were beginning to flicker on, casting pools of warm light along the sidewalk. The evening rush was starting, people hurrying home from work with their heads down and their phones pressed to their ears. But inside the coffee shop, time moved differently, measured not in minutes, but in the depth of connection between two people learning to trust each other. "Luke," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah? Thank you. For this place. For not asking questions I'm not ready to answer. For making it okay to just exist here." Luke felt something warm and profound settle in his chest, a sense of rightness that he'd been searching for without knowing it. "Thank you for letting me share your table again, for trusting me enough to come back." They sat together as the coffee shop gradually emptied around them, as the jazz music played softly from the vintage speakers, as the last of the afternoon light faded into the gentle glow of evening. Neither of them spoke about tomorrow, about whether this fragile connection would survive the harsh light of day, about what it might mean to keep choosing each other in a world that offered so many reasons to choose solitude instead. But in the quiet space between words, something was being built. Not grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but something more precious and more rare. The simple recognition that they had found in each other a place to rest, a place to be seen without being judged, a place where the weight of the world could be set down for a while. When Jessica finally did leave, stepping out into the cool evening air, she carried with her the memory of Luke's steady presence, the taste of coffee that had been made specifically for her, the feeling of being welcomed exactly as she was. And Luke, watching her walk away into the gathering dusk, found himself already looking forward to tomorrow, to the possibility of another conversation, another shared silence, another step toward something neither of them had dared to hope for. The coffee shop settled into evening quiet, but the warmth lingered, like the afterglow of a fire that had burned clean and bright. In a city full of strangers, two people had found each other. In a world that often felt cold and disconnected, they had created a small pocket of warmth and understanding. And in that pocket, love was beginning to grow, patient and gentle and real. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel possible. Jessica found herself walking the same streets she'd wandered the day before, but this time with purpose rather than aimless restlessness. Her steps carried her toward the coffee shop like a compass needle finding true north, though she told herself she was just in the neighborhood. Luke was already behind the counter when she arrived, his movements as graceful and deliberate as always. Today, he wore a simple navy sweater that brought out the warmth in his dark eyes, and when he looked up to see her coming through the door, his smile was immediate and genuine. "Comfort special?" he asked, already reaching for a cup. You remember, Jessica said, surprised by how pleased she felt. I remember everything about yesterday, Luke replied, beginning the careful ritual of preparing her drink, including the fact that you looked like you actually enjoyed something for the first time since I met you. Jessica felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being truly seen. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been paying attention, Luke said, sliding the perfectly crafted coffee across the counter. And I've been paying attention. The admission hung between them, honest and unguarded. Jessica accepted the cup, their fingers brushing again in that brief moment of contact that sent warmth shooting up her arm. This time, she didn't pull away quite as quickly. The window table, Luke asked, though he already knew the answer. The window table, Jessica confirmed. They settled into what had somehow become their chairs, their routine, their small ritual of connection in a world that offered precious few of them. Outside, the morning sun painted the street in shades of gold and amber, and the coffee shop around them hummed with its usual gentle energy. So, Luke said, settling back with his own cup, tell me something I don't know about you. Jessica tensed slightly, her automatic defenses rising. That's a dangerous question. All the best questions are, Luke replied easily. But I'm not asking for your secrets. I'm asking for a story, something small, something that made you who you are. Jessica considered this, turning her cup between her hands as she searched for something safe to share. I used to want to be a journalist, she said finally, back when I believed that truth mattered more than power. What changed your mind? I learned that power has a way of rewriting truth, Jessica said, her voice carrying the weight of hard-won experience, and that sometimes the people who need protecting the most are the ones nobody wants to believe. Luke nodded, hearing the pain beneath her careful words. Sounds like you learned that lesson the hard way. Most important lessons come that way, Jessica replied. What about you? Was coffee always the plan? Luke laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the space between them. Not even close. I used to think I wanted to be a teacher. History, specifically. I had this idea that understanding the past could help people make better choices in the future. What changed? I realized I was more interested in helping people write their own stories than in teaching them about dead ones, Luke said. This place, these conversations, watching people find a little bit of peace in their day. That felt more real to me than anything I could do in a classroom. Jessica studied his face, noting the way he spoke about his work with genuine passion. Do you ever regret it, giving up teaching? Never, Luke said without hesitation. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I can feel it in my bones. The certainty in his voice caught Jessica off guard. She'd spent so many years feeling displaced, like she was living someone else's life, that Luke's sense of belonging felt almost foreign. How do you know? How can you be so sure? Because when you're doing what you're meant to do, it doesn't feel like work, Luke said. It feels like breathing, natural and necessary, and impossible to imagine living without. Jessica took a sip of her coffee, letting his words settle in her mind. I don't think I've ever felt that way about anything. Maybe you just haven't found your thing yet, Luke suggested gently. Or maybe you found it, but didn't recognize it because it looked different than what you expected. Maybe, Jessica said, though she sounded unconvinced. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the world outside continue its relentless motion. A group of schoolchildren walked past, their laughter bright and carefree. An elderly couple shared a newspaper on the bench across the street, their comfortable familiarity Speaking of decades spent learning each other's rhythms, the city pulsed around them with its usual energy, but from their window table, it all felt manageable and warm. "Can I ask you something now?" Luke said eventually. "Fair's fair," Jessica replied. "Yesterday, when you first walked in here, you looked like you were ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. What made you stay?" Jessica considered the question, remembering the way she'd felt standing in the doorway, caught between fleeing and staying. "You didn't try to sell me anything," she said finally. "You didn't perform. You just asked what I wanted, and then you made it. No agenda, no angle. I couldn't remember the last time someone had done that. Most people are so busy trying to impress each other that they forget to just be present," Luke observed. "But presence is the only gift that really matters." "Where did you learn that?" Jessica asked, genuinely curious. "From my father, mostly," Luke said, his voice growing softer with memory. "He used to tell me that attention was the purest form of generosity, that really seeing someone, really listening to them, was the most valuable thing you could offer." "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Luke said simply. "Gone now, but the lesson stuck." Jessica heard the grief in his voice, carefully contained, but unmistakably present. "I'm sorry." "Me too," Luke said. "But I try to honor him by living the way he taught me. Present, generous, unafraid of other people's pain." The afternoon stretched on around them, marked by the gentle rhythm of the coffee shop's life. Luke excused himself periodically to serve other customers, but he always returned to their table, to their conversation, to the connection that seemed to deepen with each shared story. "You know," Jessica said during one of these interludes, "I keep expecting this to feel weird, sitting here, talking to you, letting myself relax, but it doesn't." "Why should it feel weird?" Luke asked. "Because I don't usually do this. Trust people. Let them close enough to matter. What's different about now?" Jessica looked at him, really looked, taking in the steady kindness in his eyes, the way he listened like her words were important, the absence of any agenda beyond simple human connection. "You are," she said quietly. "You're different." Luke felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee and everything to do with the woman sitting across from him. "You're different too," he said. "Different from anyone I've ever met." The admission hung between them, heavier than their previous exchanges, weighted with possibility and promise. Neither of them moved to fill the silence that followed, both understanding that some moments were too precious to rush past with unnecessary words. Outside, the afternoon light was beginning its gradual shift toward evening, painting the coffee shop in warm, golden hues. The other customers had thinned out, leaving Luke and Jessica in a bubble of quiet intimacy that felt both fragile and unbreakable. "Jessica," Luke said finally, his voice low and careful. "Yeah, I know we just met. I know this is probably crazy, but I feel like I've been waiting for you to walk through that door my entire life." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. In her experience, such declarations usually came with strings attached, with expectations and demands that she couldn't meet. But looking at Luke, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, she sensed only truth. "Luke," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I feel like I've been walking toward this place, toward you, for longer than I can remember. Like everything that came before was just preparation for finding this." The words surprised her, as much as they seemed to surprise him. Jessica had spent so many years guarding her heart, protecting herself from disappointment and betrayal, that admitting to hope felt almost revolutionary. Luke reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, his fingers found hers, warm and gentle and steady. The contact sent electricity through her entire body, but it wasn't the sharp shock of attraction. It was something deeper, more fundamental. Recognition. "What happens now?" Jessica asked, her fingers intertwining with his. "I don't know," Luke admitted, "but I'd like to find out. If you want to find out too." Jessica looked down at their joined hands, at the way her pale fingers looked against his darker ones, at the simple rightness of the connection. "I want to find out," she said. "I'm scared, but I want to find out." "Scared is okay," Luke said gently. "Scared means it matters." They sat like that as the light outside continued to fade, their hands linked across the small table, their coffee growing cold as they lost themselves in each other's eyes. Around them, the coffee shop settled into evening quiet, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy discovering that love didn't always announce itself with fanfare and drama. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in the space between words, in the warmth of understanding, in the simple recognition that you had found someone worth trusting with your heart. "Luke," Jessica said eventually. Tomorrow, same time." Luke's smile was radiant. "I'll be here." "Good," Jessica said, squeezing his fingers gently, "because I think I'm going to need more of that comfort special." "I think I can arrange that," Luke replied, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing the softest kiss to her knuckles. "I think I can arrange whatever you need." You need. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Jessica would arrive each morning just as the rush began to thin, and Luke would have her comfort special ready before she even reached the counter. They'd claim their window table like it was reserved for them alone, and the world outside would fade into background noise as they discovered each other one conversation at a time. Some mornings, they talked about everything. Jessica found herself sharing stories she'd kept locked away for years, memories of her grandmother's kitchen, and the dreams she'd abandoned, in the moments that had shaped her into someone who trusted carefully. Luke spoke of his father's lessons about kindness, about the customers who'd become friends, about the way he'd learned to read people's needs in the slump of their shoulders, or the way they held their coffee cups. Other mornings, they barely spoke at all, content to exist in each other's presence, while rain drummed against the windows or sunlight painted patterns across their table. Jessica discovered that silence with Luke felt different than the isolation she'd grown accustomed to. This was shared quiet, comfortable, and warm, like sitting by a fire on a winter evening. The coffee shop became their sanctuary, but gradually their world began to expand beyond its walls. Luke would walk her to the subway when she finally had to leave, their steps slow and reluctant. One afternoon, when the weather was particularly beautiful, he suggested they take their drinks outside to the small park across the street. Jessica's first instinct was to refuse, to maintain the safety of their established routine. But something in Luke's hopeful expression made her nod instead. They sat on a bench beneath a maple tree, whose leaves had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and Jessica realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd simply sat outside without purpose or agenda. Luke pointed out a squirrel that seemed determined to bury an acorn in the exact spot where a pigeon was trying to build a nest, and Jessica found herself laughing at the absurd territorial dispute. The sound of her own laughter startled her. When had she stopped finding joy in simple moments like this? "You have a beautiful laugh," Luke said, his voice warm with affection. "I hope you know that." Jessica felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't laugh very often," Then I consider myself lucky to hear it, Luke replied, reaching over to brush a fallen leaf from her shoulder. The gesture was so gentle, so naturally caring, that Jessica felt something inside her chest expand and soften. As October deepened into November, their conversations grew more intimate. Jessica found herself telling Luke about the weight she carried, the responsibility she felt for things beyond her control, the way she'd learned to expect disappointment so thoroughly that joy felt foreign. She spoke carefully at first, testing his reactions, waiting for him to pull away, or offer unwanted advice, or try to fix what she'd learned couldn't be repaired. But Luke simply listened, his presence steady and accepting. He didn't minimize her experiences or rush to reassure her that everything would be fine. Instead, he witnessed her pain with the same gentle attention he brought to everything else. And somehow, that witnessing felt more healing than any solution could have been. "You carry so much," he said one afternoon as they sat in their usual spot, watching pedestrians hurry past, with their heads bent against the wind. "You don't have to carry it all alone anymore." And so their story continues, in morning coffee rituals and window table conversations, in the space between words, in the warmth of understanding. Jessica learned that love doesn't always require grand gestures or dramatic proclamations. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like steam rising from a perfectly crafted cup, like sunlight filtering through rain-streaked glass. And Luke discovered that the sanctuary he'd built for others had become the place where his own heart could finally rest. Tonight, let their gentle beginning remind you that connection is possible, that trust can be rebuilt one conversation at a time, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories are written not in the noise of the world, but in the soft spaces where two souls choose to see each other clearly. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the kind of love that feels like coming home.